Welcome. In this presentation, I will be speaking on the keys to expression, that being the breath and rhythm. Now, for many years, I've heard from teachers that expression is something that is either innate, musicality is either innate in a student or it's not. And this is something that I disagree with wholeheartedly. I've spent quite a number of years, you know, researching what makes a musical performance, what makes an artistic, expressive performance. And so in this lecture, we will go over my findings on this. So the first thing I want to talk about is the universality of music. Now, I really like this concept of universality. What universality is to me, it's basically universal laws that are true in a micro sense and also in a macro sense. I find this to be quite enlightening. For example, we know that the same atoms that compose elements here on Earth in our bodies are the same elements found across the entire universe. The same laws, the physical laws, such as gravity and electromagnetism, the speed limitations of light, for example, time dilation, all of these things that exist here on Earth exist in every part of the universe. So there's something quite mystical and yet profound about that realization that somehow everything is really very much connected, through space and through time. Now, the reason I like approaching from that standpoint is because music itself is a representation of these universal laws that exist, both energy and mass. So that's kind of the approach we'll be taking in this journey. So, sound. What is sound? To me, I've thought a lot about this, and when it comes down to it, sound is simply the way our brains interpret vibration, resonance. So there's this concept that I really like about resonance. There's a universality to this. Everything is resonance. If you think about it, matter and energy are really one and the same. If you look at an atom, the smallest, minute, microscopic view of an atom, it's vibrating. The electrons are moving, everything's vibrating. Even as we approach absolute zero, mass is still moving. If we go to energy, think about what energy is. Sound propagates in waves. Light propagates in waves. And what is wave but oscillation, basically? Pulsations happening rapidly. That's what resonance is. That's what sound is. When we hear a note on the piano, it's oscillating at 440 oscillations per second, what's known as 440 hertz for A440. And every single note and the way they play and juxtapose against each other is all just a series of very complex and harmonious resonances. So resonance in itself is kind of sympathetic. What that means is, let's say that I'm speaking or you're listening to music. That energy, that waveform, that resonance moves air particles through the air that then transfers that energy into our ears. It vibrates the follicles in our ears as well as our eardrums, which then turns into electrical signals, travels into the auditory nerve in the brain, and then we interpret as sound. So you can see that the resonance travels through a medium, it transfers. So in a way, it's sympathetic, just in the same way that a piano makes sound. When you press a key and the hammer strikes a string, the string vibrates, it travels through the bridge and resonates within the soundboard, amplifying the sound. This is actually a theory of mine. One of the great mysteries of music is, why does music infer an emotional response from its listeners? And I think it's precisely this, that somehow music is able to sympathetically resonate our spirits, our hearts, our emotions. And that's why I believe that music is actually a universal language. Because just like everything is made up of the same matter, atoms, and energy, I believe consciousness itself is made up of the same consciousness, the same kind of fundamental, desire for love, the desire for connectivity and wholeness and purpose connects us all in the same way. And I think that's part of the reason why that mystery exists. So first of all, a little philosophical look at that universality of resonance. And if you think about experiences in our life, they have a certain resonance as well. One of my theories or definitions of masterpieces is that it's not just the technical way that the pieces have been composed, it's that they so accurately portray some of the most beautiful human experiences known, right? When we hear something beautiful like the Brahms Intermezzo, to me, it's like a look back at one's entire life and the feelings of gratitude and solemnness and all the surprises and love that we felt in that life. It's an appreciation that I think is one of the most profound in all of our repertoire. That's what makes a masterpiece to me. It's the capturing the most beautiful parts of our human existence. Next, I'd like to talk about the breath, the nature of breath. So again, this is a universal concept. And we think about breathing, okay, we inhale, we exhale, but where else do we see this kind of inhalation cycle? We see it in plants, we see it in all other animals, we see it in cells, we see it in ecosystems. Even ecosystems breathe. In a way, our planet is breathing, right? Stars are breathing. And one of my big theories is that, I think this is very interesting, the Big Bang Theory, I think actually is just the inhalation cycle of the universe. Imagine that the universe is inhaling, and that's why it's expanding, and eventually it'll exhale and contract. And that we're just going through these infinite numbers of cycles of expansions and contractions, inhalation and exhalation cycles. It's also reflected every day. When we wake up in the morning, that's kind of like an inhalation cycle. And when we go to bed at night, it's like an exhalation cycle. Because I think that the breath cycle is also related to life and death. Okay? So when the first thing a baby does when they're born is they take a breath and then they, of course, cry. Right? The last thing we do before we die is we exhale our final breath. So I feel like life and death is also a manifestation of this breath. Now, the reason I think this is so profound is because if we recognize the fact that breath is significant in the whole universe, in our whole lives, then that means that the breath must be the key, or at least a key to expression. So this whole expansion, you know, so one thing I think it's a great exercise for us is just to breathe, just to take in a full breath. So take it in with me. Let's inhale. Feel it stretch your rib cage, feel it expand your lungs, and let it go. Right? And think about when you see an expressive performer, it's so much in the breath like that. Additionally, human beings, we express through our breath. Think about it, right? When you laugh, that's the breath. When you cry, the way you breathe changes. When you're angry, your breath changes. When you're excited, the breath changes. When you're lonely, the breath changes, right? So just by the way I breathe, the way we breathe, we can communicate to each other how we feel. If I say, it's not even the words, right? The way we breathe can differ from the way what we're saying, and it changes the meaning entirely. If I say, I'm so happy today, it's not very convincing, right? Okay, because you can tell from my breath that I'm not really portraying that. So again, using the breath to communicate in music. On this point, when we breathe, those two parts of the breath, we inhale and we exhale. When we inhale, we're taking in air and we're taking in energy. Okay, so in thermodynamics, we know that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Right? So it's like we do not create energy, we draw in energy and we allow that energy to come out of us. The only thing that happens with the energy is it transforms. Our emotions in the energy can transform. Emotions is energy. So when we're playing and when we're expressing through music or singing through music, right, the breath we take is all important. I'll explain why. If you do not take a breath with the emotional intent, it's very difficult to communicate that when you sing or when you play, right? So for this, I'm going to show some examples. I'm going to use actually a Beethoven sonata is the year, 250th year anniversary of Beethoven's birth year rather. So I figured we could use some Beethoven as inspiration today. So this is his Opus 90 E minor sonata. Okay, so we know that this particular sonata is about kind of a conflict of the mind and the heart. There's this kind of a pull and tug between these two concepts here. And let's say I play this without any kind of breath engagement, but I am going to try to be expressive. Okay. Okay. I did dynamics. I counted, right? But I wasn't really engaging my breath. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to think about my preparatory breath. That is the breath before I play a phrase, start a phrase. Okay? So now I can change, and when I'm thinking about my breath, I'm also thinking about the emotional intent. So let's say in the first chord, now I'm thinking about the breath. I'm thinking I want to be, to feel in a state of tension, like my stomach's tied in a knot, right? Like I'm on the verge of tears, like I'm on the verge of just bursting out in just the state of chaos, right? Here we go. So now with the breath. Then my breath changes. Maybe this is feeling tender, feeling weak, feeling vulnerable, and yearning all at the same time. New breath. Right? And I think this whole piece is a good example because we have these short phrases, we have some long phrases, and every one of these phrases requires a different intention on the preparation breath, right? Even going on. How I breathe changes the music. If I breathe like this, I can give it some expression. Okay? So this whole concept, I think, is extremely powerful when we're talking about the preparatory breath. And you can do this in just without even playing, right? You might have a student who just says, okay, I want you to take a breath like you're angry. Maybe that. Or take a breath like you're looking forward to Christmas or your birthday. Maybe a little bit of surprise. Take a breath like you're nervous. Maybe you're not breathing so much. Maybe you're holding your breath. So practicing that type of breathing is going to make us both better actors and also better performers as well, and more artistic. So continuing with this concept of breath. So we've talked about how we can intertwine and infuse these preparatory breaths with an emotional intention. Okay, so the next thing I want to explore here is counting, right? Because that's the second part of this presentation is on rhythm, right? So the first major point about rhythm is when you're counting, you're breathing. When you're speaking, you're breathing. So the whole point of counting is to engage the breath actually, fundamentally. So just counting 1, 2, 3, 4. We're already breathing with the music. Now, some of you are conductors. Some of you have some experience conducting. I conduct myself. And this is a major component of conducting is that we're always counting and we're always breathing. So one of the challenges as a conductor is the question, how do you communicate the music when you're producing no sound? And the key is what I just said. You breathe and you count. That's all you have to do. So I'll give you an example of this. And for this example, we're going to go to the Moonlight Sonata, sticking with the theme of Beethoven. We'll do some other composers as well, but it is, its 250th anniversary. So just take a look at the music here. I'll use a baton, but you don't have to use a baton for this exercise. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to conduct this with a mistake that many people do, which is they play this in 4/4. Okay, they think of it as 4 beats when it's actually in cut time. Okay, so if I'm conducting in 4 and I'm counting, I might get this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that would be the, if I were playing it, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, So when we're counting, the biggest mistake that I think we make oftentimes, or that our students make, is they have too many downbeats. All right, downbeats are really important to understand initially, just to get a sense of the ictus of the beat. That's very important. But it's also important to understand that we have downbeats, we have upbeats, right? And in meter, we want to be leading somewhere. That's the difference between just rhythm and meter. Meter is rhythm that has structure, right? So in this case, if we're actually counting this in 2/2 time, cut time, it changes entirely. Let's feel it in the half notes now. 1, 2, 1. Now notice when I counted that, I didn't just say 1, 2, because that would have been downbeat, downbeat. Instead, I gave a light downbeat on beat 1, and I carried it legato all the way to the following downbeat. Try again with me. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So I'm varying the weight of the downness, and I'm also phrasing in the way I count. I'm looking for direction. I'm looking for moments of tension. See? So the counting is a wonderful way to teach our students, and for us also to practice phrasing and to connect it with the breath. Okay? It works going on. 1, 2, 1. I engage my breath preparation because the chord changed. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And now I breathe. And 1, 2, 1. So by me counting out loud like this, it's hopefully enabling you to see the techniques I'm using to, convey the specificities of expression within a piece like the Moonlight Sonata. So, uh, yeah, so pretty powerful stuff, and it always works. So oftentimes an exercise I like to do is just have a student think like a conductor, which means they're just counting it. You don't have to incorporate the hands unless you really want to. You could incorporate the hands and teach them the gestures. The same thing happens in conducting. If you're as long as you're breathing, and then the hands are really just reflecting the breaths. So if I was conducting that, I want my preparatory gesture to reflect the emotional intent as well. So to do that, I need to breathe with that emotional intent, and then use good sound conducting technique, and that will be communicated. So that'd be 1 and 2, like that. 1, and here's the breath. So there I have the breath supporting the gesture, right? And human beings, we're social beings. We're very sensitive to what people are portraying and stuff. So just naturally, people will pick up these cues, without necessarily having to be trained on what I'm trying to express. So the next concept I'd like to explore is on the power of focus. Okay. So focus can mean many things. It can mean concentrating the mind and not getting sidetracked. Focus can also mean concentration of energy, right? So focusing is just taking something that's kind of more, spread out and amorphous, and focusing it down to a point. This is really a powerful concept to me, and I'll tell you why. Because focus solves the problem we have with how much energy do we have, right? Because like I said before, you cannot create energy. Okay? As much of a breath as you take in, as much air as you take in, as much energy as you take in, it's only so much energy, right? You can't take in more air than your lungs can hold. You cannot take in more energy than is in the air that you inhale, right? Okay, so Then how does a pianist like Sviatoslav Richter, right, create such power, such such immensity in the sound and the communication, or Martha Argerich, or all the greats out there, Daniel Barenboim? How do they pull that off, Andras Schiff? And the secret actually is not the amount of energy they're taking in, but the focus of the energy. So to give you an example of the power of focus, imagine a magnifying lens. So there's something known as a Fresnel lens. It's rather quite cool. And they have Fresnel lenses about the size of a standard door, okay, maybe 2.5 feet by 6 feet or so in length. And you can take that and just on a nice sunny day, the light that touches that Fresnel lens focuses to a single point, pretty focused point, such that it can literally melt rock within seconds. And you can find this on YouTube. Just look it up. Look up Fresnel lens, melting rock, and you'll see it happens almost instantaneously. Think about that. We walk around all day long, bathing in the sun, even in a cool day. As long as it's sunny, the energy within just, a less than 12 square foot section, the energy there is enough to melt rock and turn it into molten lava. Think about that. Right? Think about that. The energy in that small amount of energy is that powerful. Okay? If it's focused. Right? So how do we do this and apply this in music? Well, this gets into a concept that I think is important to understand, which is how to focus the breath. And this gets into a concept known as diaphragmatic breathing. So I'm going to show you a very quick exercise on how to diaphragmatically breathe correctly. If you're a singer or have singing training, you'll already know how to do this. Otherwise, this will be helpful. So let me just show you right over here first. I'll stand up to make this a little bit easier to see. So the first concept of diaphragmatic breathing is when you inhale, we want our belly to actually expand outwards, which means our diaphragm is actually dropping in level. So it looks like this. I take my breath. So my belly's out, and then I'm just going to blow the air out. My belly comes back in. So that's basically the concept of diaphragmatic breathing. So an exercise we can do is just do short bursts like this. Shh, 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 shh. So when my belly's coming in, I'm learning to kind of support my breath properly by lifting the diaphragm up. Then you can do long streams like an S like this. And notice how I'm creating, a very small opening so that the air that's escaping is escaping very fast at a high velocity, so it's energized. It's kind of like an air compressor. You compress air in an air compressor, and now you release it through a small valve, and now it has a very high PSI, or pounds per square inch, right? So it becomes a lot more powerful just by pressurization. That's focus. So you can focus the breath that way. And we actually use that, or at least I do, when I conduct and when I play as well. I find it to be super, super helpful to kind of focus that energy. And I was actually doing that when I was playing the expert of the Mozart, or the Beethoven Moonlight. So I'll show you how that kind of works. I'm going to use that in a slightly different example here. In this next example, we're going to explore, let's explore a Chopin piece. Okay, so in this example, we're looking at the C minor Nocturne by Chopin. And so again, preparatory breath, but this time I'm going to engage my breath by lifting into my diaphragm. I'm going to keep my shoulders and everything above that very, very relaxed, because that is my core of support here. Okay, so if I just play, let's say I breathe, I'm going to engage my breath, but I'm not going to focus the breath. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, so that's me trying to be expressive, breathing some, but not really focusing on much. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to focus that breath a lot, okay, in my support. But again, that's just my base of my support. My abdominal muscles, I'm not going to keep anything else, nothing else is going to be tense, okay? So I'll change the view here so you can see me a bit better here as I do this. Okay, so I'm making sure everything is very, very free. My core is going to be engaged now, though. Here I go. I'm going to breathe. Breathe. Okay. So you could choose to interpret it any way you want, but that's an example of how to kind of engage the breath and focus that intensity. It also, this is actually a very good piece for another example of type of breathing. When the theme returns at the end, okay, another thing, think about how air works. So you can compress it, you can focus it and channel it like that. Sometimes it's a breezy, windy day or a storm, and now it's just very fast air and it's flowing and it's changing directions. Well, we can breathe that way as well, like I'm speaking right now. Right? So you can get that air really flowing fast, and that can work well for a section like that section at the end. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Where it feels like it's almost like you're at the mercy of this momentum that's drawing us left and right, right? So again, using a combination of that breathing and the breath to create that, and the rhythm to create that effect. So the power of focus, yes. Next, we're going to explore time. Time. And why time? We've talked about rhythm. We talked about rhythm already. But time, because that's the second element of music, isn't it? We have sound, which is resonance, and time, which is at least as mysterious as resonance, right? So time itself. And I have some pretty big theories on what time is. And I'm not going to get into this in this video. I'll have other videos where I talk about some of my philosophies of physics and how it may relate to music. But the nature of time, interestingly enough, in physics we know that time is quite strange because it doesn't really exist, right? It's something that we know we experience in this third dimension, but we also know in physics that time actually doesn't really exist. We kind of experience it in segments, but we're not going to get into that too far. It's really cool stuff, though. If you're interested, definitely check out or subscribe to my channel. I'll have videos in the future that I'll post on some of these other topics. So this is what I like to think of. As a musician, you're a magician, okay? Musician. And this is what we do. We influence the perception of time. We influence the perception of time. Because we can't change what time's doing. The second's going to tick away. But we can affect the perception of that time. Okay? So I'll give you an example. So let's say, let's use another piece here, because there's so much beautiful music out there. We might as well just explore the plethora out there. We're going to go to one of my favorite Beethoven sonatas. This is the A-flat Major Sonata, Opus 26 by Beethoven. And I absolutely love this piece so much. So let's change the view here to where you can see the music as well. So, you're going to experience time in some different ways here, okay? So how do we influence the perception of time? By changing our own perception of time. The way I like to imagine it is creating a time bubble, right? So when I'm performing, I get on stage, I sit at the piano, and I stop. And I imagine myself projecting a bubble, a sphere, right? A dome that fills the entire auditorium, that fills all the chairs and everybody in it. And now I am the master of the perception of time in there. So to me, if time stops and people are paying attention to me, it's going to feel like it stops for them too. Right? So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to slow time down for you here. So we've all experienced that. I remember one particular experience. I had the privilege of hearing Veronica Joachim performing, and it was one of the most beautiful performances I had ever heard in my whole life. It was so inspirational. I could have sworn that the heavens had opened up and the lights were shining down, and that she was playing the music of heaven. And to me, that was one of the most beautiful memories I've ever had. Also, playing in an orchestra, doing Nimrod from the Enigma Variations, right? I mean, that was a stunning experience for me too. Having the opportunity to work with a conductor that was able to really capture the stillness of that. Right? So now we're going to talk about another element of time. Okay, so we know that we're kind of influencing the perception of time. So by influencing the perception of time, we can actually create tension. We can actually manipulate the sensation of tension, okay, in a phrase of music. But the question I often get is, well, how does that work? How do we create that sensation of tension? So let's go to, actually, there's lots of good choices. Yeah, let's take a look at the Pastoral Sonata, Opus 28 by Beethoven, D major. Okay, also one of my favorite sonatas by him. I think this one's a bit underrated. So this particular sonata gives us a very steady pulse in that bass line. We have this nice quarter note drone almost. And it doesn't ever change. Well, it shouldn't ever change, in my opinion, at least, right? It's so super steady. But then how do we create this push and pull, this sense of tension, right? It comes from intention, the power of intention. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk briefly about, and then I'll show you, demonstrate it on this particular sonata. So intention, what is intention? Well, it's simply us using our will. We're imagining something, we're desiring something, we're trying to intend something to come to be in existence. Okay, so get this. This is what I'm going to do here. I'm teaching you, these are literally my greatest secrets in performing, some of them at least. Okay, so I'm going to count this, but I'm going to rush it. So listen to me. I'm going to rush it. Why? Because I want to feel that excitement, the building of the momentum. All right? So it's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So I'm really revving it up. I'm really building the excitement there. I'm really trying to create that. But at the same time, I'm going to restrain myself. And I like this concept of restraint, playing with restraint. Because if you do this, okay, I'm going to intend to speed up, and I'm going to pull myself back at the same time such that my tempo is steady. All right, so again, I'm going to rush it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's the intention. But now I'm going to pull myself back and restrain it. So now I'm going to feel that tension, and I'm going to engage my core to support that tension while keeping everything above it completely loose and relaxed. So now the counting sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I'm feeling that tension build just from counting that. Now, if I can play the left hand and support it with that type of rhythmic tension, let's see what happens. I'm not going to play any of the other parts yet, just that drone in the left hand. Here we go. Let's try together. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I've got something I can create something from. So there's a sense of suspension and momentum, and it's just so magical all at the same time. To me, this piece is like standing at the foot of the Grand Canyons, at the cliff, and watching a sunrise rise up, and just basking on that energy, that moment, that excitement, that anticipation on the day yet to come, right? So, one of my favorite pieces ever, and I think a great example of how to use this tension without changing time very much. I did use a touch of rubato for the melody, for the melodic elements, right? For the intervallic moments of tension. Let's try this with another piece. Let's see. Yeah, another Beethoven. Why not? Let's do it actually with the um, Allegretto movement here of the F major sonata here. I think this is a good example of creating tension as well. So here I go. I'm going to count out loud so you can hear what I'm doing with my breath and focus it in my core using the same tools we've already talked about. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Now without counting out loud. And it continues in this way. It's just really, really kind of intentional music. You can even use this power of intention dynamically. For example, I could play the opening. This time, I'm going to try to stay piano the whole time without much of a crescendo. But my intention is for the most massive of crescendos. Let's try. Okay, so there I'm doing a crescendo in my intention, but I actually didn't do much of one dynamically, just the smallest. So in this way, you take something that's less and you create the perception that it is more, right? Powerful tool used by the greatest musicians. So I think that's really a great one to think about. So we've covered a lot of really cool topics today. I hope this has been educational for you. There's just a few closing remarks that I'd like to share with you. So expansion of the breath. We can train this through stretching. We should be stretching our breaths, but also stretching our experiences, trying new foods, listening to new composers, exploring new ways of doing things, playing our pieces more and more different creative ways, right? In this way, we're also nurturing this creativity through the breath. Why is music so profound? To me, music is one of the most profound arts because it is reflective of our desire for liberation from fear. In music, we're safe to do anything. We're safe to explore our emotions. We're safe to express how we would. So, to me, if you're going to have your students become expressive, you have to create a safe environment for them to be able to liberate themselves. So that's very important. Because to liberate oneself and be expressive in music requires us to be willing, to be courageous, to develop determination and concentration, to expand and make our minds and hearts more flexible, our imaginations more creative. And that can only happen through trust. Trust in ourselves, trust in our teachers, trust in our purpose in our lives. And last but not least, I want to talk about honesty, because this is what truly makes the best music. It's when a performer or composer is able to be genuine, truly honest, to really show us the deepest of their pain, to show us their greatest joys. And the same for performers, right? So to develop this honesty in ourselves, in our students, if we can do these things, I think you might just have some success in developing in your students a lifelong gift that is without comparison. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to speaking with you or hearing from you later. You can reach out to me if you have my contact information, or leave a comment below. I'll try to get around to responding to any questions or comments. But it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much.